Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 2A News with Craig Deluz. I am your host, Craig Deluz, and here we're going to talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, firearms and politics, culture, media, you name it. We're going to talk about all things gun, all the gun time. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. Before we get going, I want to make sure to remind you, we have SHOT Show coming up, and at SHOT Show, we're going to be having the pre-SHOT Show party Monday night there in Las Vegas. That's January 19th. It's going to be at the Hofbrau House. We're going to have a good time. There's going to be plenty of free beer, free swag. There'll be some hors d'oeuvres. We'll call them snacks. I guess, gun folks don't call it hors d'oeuvres. They call them snacks. And then there'll also be prizes. So we want to encourage you folks to come on out and have a good time. Enjoy being with us. Enjoy coming and hanging out. We would love to have you there with us. Oh, as a matter of fact, I put the flyer up on my end, but I didn't put it up on your end. So there's a little flyer there. You'll see Arms Room Radio, Next Level Training, Imperium Strategic Group, Hog Holsters. A bunch of our sponsors are going to be there. So come on out once again and get your free swag and, just hang out, have some beer with us. All right, today we're going to be talking about the shooting that took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You may have heard that yesterday there was also another shooting that took place in Portland. Don't have enough info on that one to really have a real discussion about it. But we do have enough info, at least I think, to have an initial discussion when we talk about what happened. Now, we're going to have a conversation today, and what I don't want to get into is I don't want to get into whether or not ICE should have been there, I don't want to get into the extraneous politics. I want to focus on what happened in this particular accident, in this particular incident, and hopefully what can be learned from this incident and what can be determined from this incident. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to kind of see the shooting that took place. And I'm going to give it to you from two different angles. One of them is definitely clearer than the other, but it gives you kind of a chance to see exactly what it is that we're talking about here. And first, I'm going to play the first angle of the shooting. Okay, so that's the first angle. That's the angle that most people have seen. Now, there's another angle, and unfortunately, this one was taken from much farther away, so it's a little bit harder to see. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to see this as well, and it definitely gives you a different perspective, or at least I think it should give you a different perspective, or at the very least, it adds a lot more information to the situation. All right, so you see in that particular one, you actually see the officer get struck, where in the first one, you can't really see the officer get struck. You just see him kind of moved out of the way. So anyway, so that's the evidence or the photo there. I mean, there's other photos and whatnot that we'll be talking about a little bit later. But from that, the interesting thing is that you have two very different perspectives as to what happened. And I wanted to share with you some comments from some notables that kind of represent the extreme of the two positions. The first one, this is the mayor of Minneapolis, I believe his name is Nicholas Fry.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying, getting killed. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here.
Okay, so that's one perspective. And now then on the other end, you have Kristi Noem, the Director of Homeland Security, and she was asked a question, and this was her response.
You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect.
Okay. So the kind of the two sides have been kind of laid out. And I wanted to bring someone on who understands use of force, but someone who brings kind of a different perspective. Because I know a lot of folks in the gun rights community who've got a lot of law enforcement, and they, for the most part, I believe that I can accurately articulate the perspective from that particular perspective. But I also know that this is not as necessarily as clear cut as it appears to be, which is what, by the way, none of these situations ever really are. Which is why we in the gun rights community have always been kind of, let's take a look and wait till all the information comes out. And so, with that, I wanted to invite onto the show a gentleman who I've known for over a decade now. He is a trainer. He is nationally known. He is a national figure in Second Amendment media, and I wanted to get his perspective on this particular situation. So, with that, I want to welcome to the program Mr. Rob Pincus.
Good to be here, Craig. Thanks.
It's excellent to have you. So, you saw the kind of the information, and I'm sure that you've probably spent a lot of time with a lot of the stuff, a lot of the media that's been going on. Wanted to first of all just kind of get your general perspective, what you see here, and anyway, so let's just go with that. Let's go. What do you see in this particular situation?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yesterday, I made a post, which I know you saw. Maybe that's what prompted this conversation. Just reminding everyone that it's probably not as simple and clear cut as either side of the bigger political issue that's going on in our country right now about what ICE is doing and should they be doing and how are they doing it and where are they doing it and all of those things is presenting. And I love that you played those two clips because they both. Are full of rhetoric, and they both definitely establish a firm position in the way that those speakers want their audiences. And I don't think they're an overlapping audience is one of the problems. But in the gun community, we've got members of both audience. The audience that wants to hear ICE did everything right, and the audience that wants to hear ICE did everything wrong. And that's really what I was responding to yesterday was a lot of things that I was seeing in my feed from people being very definitive and very absolute about what they saw and what they believed those videos they were seeing and the things they were hearing determined about the incident. And I just simply don't think it's that clear.
Okay, so what are some of the things that you heard that you didn't think are that clear?
Well, first of all, the let's go with the official government position, right? I've worked in law enforcement. I provide a lot of training to law enforcement, U.S. and outside, and other jurisdictions, other countries, military training. That's what I've done the majority of the last 25 years. Provide training, probably about 50-50 armed professionals versus private citizens. So when I see something like this, I look at it as a training issue, right? Would I train officers to respond in the ways we saw, to do the things that we saw? Would I want officers that had been students of mine to do the things that we saw in that video? So when I hear a statement from the leader of the organization, from Christy Noem, which honestly, we know there are more facts to come out. I've seen some video that extends before the video clip that you showed. I don't see any officers pushing any vehicle out of the snow. It certainly doesn't, if you didn't see that video and you heard her explanation, what I would envision is some guys trying to push a vehicle out of the snow and a woman coming into the scene from out of nowhere trying to quote unquote ram them. That's obviously not what happened there. On the other side of the perspective, you've got, or the other perspective you've got is a guy saying these people have no business being in where they are. The agents, these federal agents, presumably in his opinion, shouldn't be there. And that's sort of nonsensical too. And if the government system we have, the federal agents have right and reason to be wherever they perceive a potential crime that they need to investigate, enforcement action they need to take. And obviously, there's a lot of good reason to believe there are immigration enforcement issues that need to happen in Minneapolis. So those agents have reason to be there. And his personal opinion, and a lot of people's personal opinions on whether or not they should be there, or what the real reason they're there is, really don't matter to the facts of the incident. So clearing all the rhetoric out, what I actually see is officers getting out of their vehicles, agents, officers, I'll use that interchangeably, uh, getting out of their vehicles, approaching a vehicle that is definitely not attacking them. Is she annoying them? Quite obviously. Are they perturbed? Absolutely. Are they within the bounds of legal right under their jurisdiction, under their power to approach that vehicle, to detain her? I think absolutely they're within their rights
Something
at
to
that
make sure
moment.
to note is what you are correct. While she was not attacking them, she was blocking the street.
Right. And
So she was impeding them in, as they would say, in the performance of their duties.
yeah, and apparently there's a lot of reason to believe she was intentional. She put herself in that place to do
Right.
just that, to annoy the officers as a form of protest against what they were doing. And we know that this has been happening a lot. There's some, let's say, spontaneous utterance would be the term we use, from her wife, on video, saying, I brought her here, this is my fault, that kind of thing. Like, clearly they were there. That's probably why that video was so readily being shot at the time, to annoy and perturb and interfere with the officers. The problem is there's a huge leap for me from what I've seen, from they were there to protest, annoy, interfere with the officer's job, and they were attacking the officers, or they were performing acts of domestic terrorism, or this is the sensationalized stuff we see. Problem is we don't know what was in the minds of those officers. Now let's get it. You got to go look at it from that standpoint. They probably have now seen this woman for some extended period of time doing annoying stuff. They've reached a threshold where they're now going to confront her. They're going to take direct action. Realize that one of the videos that's out there shows the officer who eventually shoots very casually, not tactically, not with any sense of urgency or fear or concern for this woman being a threat in any way. Very casually walking around the other side of the vehicle with his cell phone being held up, not even videoing her for most of what you see on camera. He's videoing the crowd, the other people in the area, trying to collect names, faces, record the events, license plate numbers, whatever he may be doing. He's not approaching. I've seen an AI altered picture that's like a drone view looking down, that everybody should know is apparently an AI manufactured thing, that shows an agent with a rifle pointing at that vehicle with the passenger side door open, as if they were doing a aggressive, tactical, high risk kind of interdiction of that vehicle. Clearly that's not what it was, and I think that's really important to the mindset here. Those agents did not appear to think she was a violent attacking threat when they approached the vehicle in any way. So
And
what
to
we
note,
have,
by the way, real quick, even the officer who wound up shooting did not approach the vehicle with his firearm drawn.
right, exactly. And the guy who walked up trying to open the door. If this were a high risk, high threat, this person was attacking, ramming, any of those words, domestic terrorism you want to throw out there, if she was even the subject of an investigation for potential domestic terrorism, those agents never would have been behaving the way they were behaving. So you sort of have to, by the behavior of the officers and agents, you have to take that off the table. They were approaching her because they were annoyed and she was interfering. I believe she did not think that was going to happen. There was some period of time, by all the what I think is credible evidence and testimony and the facts, that she's been doing this for some period of time. So she had no reason to believe that she was going to maybe finally, in a lot of people's minds, maybe even one of the opinions I hold, is be approached and be told, listen, you're at a threshold here. We've had enough of your annoyance. We've had enough of your interfering. We've had enough of your protest. This is not appropriate. You're causing a danger to people by your actions out here in the road. You're interfering with our ability to do our job. We need this to stop, or you could face charges, probably, right? Not getting shot in the face. So you've got officers that all of a sudden the situation isn't as simple as they thought it was going to be. And you've got a woman who all of a sudden her situation isn't as simple as she thought it was going to be. I see a lot of people on the, let's say, pro agent side saying, well, he made a split second decision. Even if she wasn't pointing the wheels at him and she was trying to get away, he reacted because it all happens really fast. And of course, as a self defense instructor, use of force instructor, armed professional instructor, we talk about this all the time. You have to go into a scenario with training, with best practices, with response protocols, TTPs, right? You've got to have your stuff ready to go so that when you recognize a situation, you aren't trying to make complex decisions, judgment-based decisions. You're just responding with what you've practiced to a situation that you recognize, especially under an emergency. Completely within reason that that agent standing in front of the vehicle responded to what he perceived to be a lethal threat of that vehicle coming towards him. It's also completely reasonable for me to think that that woman didn't even know he was there. She was focused on the guy who was reaching into her car, trying to get into her car, trying to open the door, and she wanted to drive away. Just prior to a lot of the video that people have seen, she actually waves what looks to be another unmarked vehicle, another Ford Explorer unmarked police type vehicle by her. And it
Well,
goes between
it
that.
wasn't a police vehicle. It was actually they were impeding ICE agents. They were allowing they were allowing civilians to go through.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And
Right.
that's so I'm just again I wasn't saying definitively that that
Okay.
was a
No,
vehicle,
I
but
just
that's what it looks like.
I
Yeah,
did have that
that's
bit of
good
information,
information.
so I wanted to share that.
Perfect. That's good information. So she's waving a vehicle by, and then presumably not going to wave the other guys by. Well, that guy doesn't even want to go by. He wants to stop and confront her. So it's possible that if we're going to use this, I think it's important to consider if we're going to use this, it all happened so fast as a justification for what the officer did. We also need to be able to integrate it all happened so fast as an explanation for what the woman did. We can't get into either one of their heads, but she had ample opportunity to attack if she had wanted to attack. And I think what she's doing there is pretty clearly trying to escape. So, where is the response? Again, let's go back to my premise as an instructor, as a trainer, as an educator. What would I have wanted an officer to do? Would I have wanted the officer to be walking around so casually? Absolutely not. If they thought she needed to be dealt with in a contact, get her out of the vehicle, let's take her out of the equation way, all of the agents should have been on the same page. They all should have been focused on that immediate action or creating a perimeter to prevent anybody else from interfering. And that officer that ended up shooting was clearly not doing either one of those things. He's walking around with his cell phone out. And I'm not saying he was taking selfies. He was performing a duty that he, recording everything that was going on around them and the people that were around them. But he wasn't doing anything tactically to address a potential threat or to deal with something that clearly could very quickly have escalated. One of the other facts that's come out is that this exact agent who shot was apparently involved in another situation a few months ago. And you may have more details on this, where he was drugged by a vehicle that was again trying to get away from the agents and received some medical attention. And potentially what's being thrown out there is that could have affected his judgment. In other words, he had a PTSD response to, well, the last time a vehicle moved quickly when we were trying to deal with the occupant, I got drugged and had to go to the hospital and got stitches. I think that's a dangerous place to go, because if that's what you're going to rest your hat on, well, he did what he did because of a pre-established condition in which he was likely to overreact. Well, that's a problem. Then he shouldn't have been there. He should not have been in that situation. Again, the agency should not have put him in that situation if there was a question about whether or not he was going to have good judgment and appropriate force responses to those actions.
Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What I appreciate about what you're talking about is that first of all, there is because I think there are a couple of different things. There's number one, explaining, right? And explaining is not excusing, right? That's
Right.
an important thing to understand. Just because I can explain why something happened doesn't mean I believe it's right. Doesn't mean that I support it. Doesn't mean that I think it's a good thing. But explaining why is an important thing. I think some people I think some of the angst and the fighting that goes on is someone's trying to explain it to help you to understand why it happened. They're not excusing it. So there's that. The other issue you have to deal with this is that it's one thing about what, you know, the wisdom that went into the things that led up to this confrontation is one thing, but then legally, because there are some legal determinations that are going to need to be made here. Legally, one has to take a look at the situation, take a look at what happened, how people responded, and did they respond within the law? And what does the law have to say about this? And I know that there are people out there who are like, their perspective of right and wrong has nothing to do with what the law is. But let's be real, the law is the law. And as I see this situation, what you have pointed out is very clearly there's different scenarios. We don't know what she was thinking. We don't know what he was thinking. What we do know is that in a situation like this, where a vehicle is coming at you, you have a split second decision to decide. This is a life or death. This is clearly a life or death situation. And now we know that this is an individual who lived through one of these life or death situations, and probably, was, once again, I can't get into his head, but if a vehicle is coming at a reasonable person, and that's usually the standard that they do, a reasonable person in the same situation, how would they react? And I believe that how he acted was within the law. I don't know about walking in front of the one part about his
Right.
training that I'm not too sure about is walking and positioning himself in front of the vehicle. That I don't know. I haven't seen anything that supports the idea that that was part of his training. But I do know that if someone is coming at you with a vehicle, that is considered an attempted assault with a deadly weapon, and the appropriate response is deadly force. Am I
Yeah, I would
incorrect?
agree
Oh,
with that.
yeah.
No, I would agree with that, but there's also a caveat on that that says you can't be a state trooper running laser or radar on the interstate, hit a car coming over the hill at 90, walk out into the lane of traffic and try to
Right.
stop the guy, and then draw your gun and shoot the guy. Yeah, that doesn't work,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
there's a reasonableness to should that agent. And again, I just think this speaks to the idea that they did
Right.
not consider this an attack. They were not under threat. They were not on guard even really in the way he was behaving. I mean, again, let's go back to if he had this experience before, he's probably the last guy you would think would put himself in front of a vehicle. I mean, from a tactical standpoint, you've got a big pickup truck. If you want to stop her from getting away and confront her, you put that pickup truck in front of her vehicle, and now she's stuck. You don't park your vehicle in the middle of the road and 15, 20 feet from her, get out of the vehicle and then walk up there. That speaks to me of an emotional reaction. It's an emotional response to her being annoying. It's not a tactical decision to interdict a vehicle. And again, just the behavior, the body language, all of that of all the agents in the environment don't speak to me of a tactical scenario. It speaks to me of an emotional scenario. Clearly, she's in an emotional state, or she wouldn't even be there. One of the things some people have tried to kind of like gotcha me after my post yesterday, I guess to some extent, and say, "Well, Rob, wait a minute. I've been watching you since the Best Defense on the Outdoor Channel, and I've read your book. You always say comply with officers, and she didn't comply, as if somehow that magically means the officers did everything right or she deserved to get shot, in the side of the head or the face or wherever she got shot. That'll be determined. That evidence, I'm sure, will come out. Well, the problem with that is, yes, in the heat of the moment, absolutely the safest thing to do is always going to be to comply with the officers, even if you think it's unfair, if you think you're caught in a misunderstanding, if they've got the wrong guy, if the officers didn't know what you were doing. In the training I provide to police officers, I'm very specific about the importance of like one person giving commands, and those commands being very clear. You don't tell somebody to put their hands up, you tell them to keep their hands still. Because if I've got my hands hidden from you and I move them out quickly to put them up, it kind of looks like a lot of the same motions I would use if I were drawing a gun to shoot you. So we talk about how to give commands, how to control situations, how to communicate with people, because we know people are going to respond differently, especially if they're already in a confrontational mode. So yeah, absolutely. I teach people, armed citizens, responsibly armed people, especially comply with the officers, deal with it in court, deal with a complaint to the captain or the chief later. We can get this worked out. Don't get yourself shot over a misunderstanding. However, when someone is choosing to go into the protest world, and that this works in both ways, right? I mean, go back to January 6th, we can talk about that too. When we, on our side, during COVID and everything else, when we're protesting, we're taking actions to protest government and again protest potentially law enforcement or interact with law enforcement in our protesting action, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, you've already made a decision to not take the safest path. So now we're balancing risk and benefit, right? And I guess if this woman had come to me and said, "Listen, I'm gonna confront these guys. I think what they're doing is wrong. It's my right." Like, well, somewhere in there you have a right to protest. I don't know if you have a right to drive your vehicle recklessly and endanger people on the street and block traffic and interfere with their duties and all that. But if you're going to do it, you got to be prepared for being confronted. And this is where I think that this is where the burden of responsibility and the obligation shifts dramatically back to the agents because they know this is happening. They know they're dealing with this. This is part of their job. Fair or not, part of their job. That woman didn't go to a training class. There's no evidence been presented that she's a paid agitator or that they're running some kind of how to interfere with the agents up to the point of getting charged class at some YMCA somewhere. I don't believe she had any mental, tactical, strategic preparation for what she was getting herself into. But again, the guys with the flashy lights and the badges know that. And they have to go into these situations being prepared for that. And that's why if you want her vehicle to stay there, you put your vehicle in front of it. You don't walk around it casually and just walk and think you're going to open the door and pull this lady out of her car while it's running, while it's in gear. I mean, let's imagine for a second that that guy was successful when he initially tried to open the door. What was his plan then? Is he going to open the door, pull her out? Well, at that point, the vehicle was in reverse. And then what? The vehicle just drives up onto the curb and hits civilians. I mean, what was that plan, right? So I really, as an educator, as a former armed professional, someone who provides training to armed professionals, there's a huge burden of responsibility on the way those agents responded to her protest actions and her annoyances, possibly illegal actions, but that doesn't mean you handle it that way. And I think that we can say she shouldn't have been there. Great, we know she's going to
Mhm.
be there. Those agents have a job to do. They have a job they're supposed to be doing professionally, and I don't know that they did that at any point on that spectrum. And then we get to, was that guy justified in shooting? Probably by a reasonable man doctrine at that exact moment. I believe a jury would find him reasonable in having shot. But there is a question of, did the agents create the situation which then led to him having a perception that he needed to shoot? That's kind of where I am. 24 hours after my initial post,
Mhm.
all this conversation, all this discussion, all the point counterpoint, all the extra videos, all the discussion I've had with a lot of other trainers as well who've reached out to me after my initial post, that's sort of where I've landed.
So I would say, and I think that's a reasonable place to be. My thing is that once again, when it comes to trying to avoid the situation happening again, obviously there are lessons to be learned, and I think you make a great point. If their goal was to make sure the car didn't move, you block it with a vehicle. You don't try it. You don't walk in front of the vehicle. I get that.
Or even,
Um,
I don't think
right,
that guy was involved in that part. I think it was the guy who walked up and tried to open her door
right,
that created the situation and was
right.
using the poor tactics. I think that other guy
Okay.
didn't even realize this was happening behind him at that
Well,
moment.
other than the guy in front of the vehicle, the guy in front of the
Right.
vehicle should have probably not been in front of the vehicle.
Well, and
My
I guess this is what I'm
understanding
saying.
of the
If
training.
he knew,
Right.
my guess is that if he knew there was going to
Mhm.
be this confrontation on the driver's side of the vehicle, he would not have wandered around to the front like that. But I don't
Mhm.
think those guys were in sync in terms of their
Right.
level of interdiction that they were about to perform.
Right.
I think he was doing one thing with the
Mhm.
crowd, and this other guy came over and created the confrontation or escalated the confrontation that the woman had created on the other side of the car. And by then,
Mhm.
the guy was in that position. And that's why he doesn't have his gun out. That's why he's not really even focused on what's going on. I think until she starts her, K turn to drive away, that's when he becomes clearly focused.
Mhm.
And that's what we see on the video.
Yeah, and it what but what now going forward, I would say this. When he got hit, I mean, basically, once the vehicle is coming at him, and in fact, when I watched the video, it was almost simultaneous him being hit and him firing his weapon. And one of the pictures that you sent, let me go ahead and see if I can pull that one up real quick. Because I think it makes the point. A lot of people are like, well, he wasn't in any danger. He wasn't in front of the vehicle. Well, no, he was in front of the vehicle. That's how you get a bullet going. That's how his shot actually went through the windshield, right through the front windshield because he was in front of the vehicle. And as we noted in
So
one of the videos, he clearly was hit by the car. And from what I saw, and once again, I fully wholly admit I could be just estimating something wrong. If it hadn't been for the fact that the road was icy, it could have ended a lot worse because his leg got taken out from underneath him.
So I run a class called Armed Defense Around Vehicles, ADAV. And this course, I call it a science experiment. What we do is we have people come in, law enforcement or civilian armed people. They come into the class. We get a vehicle out on the range, and we surgically shoot that vehicle in a variety of different positions, variety of different angles. The glass, the metal, different angles on the metal. So we get a Saturn out there. We're shooting plastic. We shoot the tire. We look at what happens when the bullets that, and in many cases, the actual hollow points, the defensive or duty rounds people are carrying. What happens when you shoot into, past, at a vehicle? What happens when the bullet strikes the glass? We inside and outside. Primarily, we're focused on the outside, especially for law enforcement. Now, I'm not an expert in this area. I run this class, run it for years. I think it's a very valuable class. People learn a lot in it. William Petty is the guy, right? William Petty is the guy for law enforcement interactions around vehicles and what happens when bullets strike vehicles. I've learned a lot from him, and a lot of people have. He's the guy to go to if you want that kind of training from a law enforcement perspective. But in my experience, in my observations, that round does not look like it was fired from the front of the vehicle. And what happens is there's a curve in windshields right at the edge there, and it's going to vary on every vehicle. But the way that round, the hole, that oval that you see, what that indicates to me is that round hit that corner pretty perpendicularly. And could it have been a little bit more to the front, 5 degrees, than to the side? Probably. But I don't think that was fired, let's say, from a 90-degree angle, looking down the front of the windshield. I think it was fired from a separate angle. Now, there's another picture I showed you. And the reason I think that picture is important is, first of all, some people were saying all the rounds were fired through the side of the window. Well, that's obviously not true. That round went through the windshield. Could someone have been in lethal danger at that angle and fired that round? Absolutely. More importantly, could they have perceived that they were in lethal danger? And I think that's a no-brainer. The perception could easily have been that they were in lethal danger. This picture that you have up now is really important because it shows that's the dust you see there is that glass, or that some combination of the gases coming out of the front of the gun, snow or whatever being blown off the hood by the muzzle blast, and some of that glass dust being created. So that's the instant, as best I can tell, of the first shot that goes through the windshield. Very clearly here, the officer is to the left of the vehicle. The impact that we see in that fuzzy video has already happened. And I think, as you said earlier, it's entirely possible that he's firing as he's getting hit by the vehicle. One of the problems I have with the characterization is that two things can be true. The vehicle touched him and he wasn't in any lethal danger. That doesn't mean his perception was that he wasn't in any lethal danger. And what we're seeing here is clearly that wheel is turning, and that's one of the problems with still pictures. Like I told you before, that no still picture is going to solve this issue. It's a dynamic event. But we know that the wheels were turned one way, the vehicle goes backwards, and then she turns them another way as she shifts into drive and starts to move forward. Was the vehicle ever moving forward with the wheels perfectly straight? I don't know. I can't tell the timing and the clarity of the video. But what I do know,
It moved forward enough for it to hit him.
right, but what I do know is that
Right.
the vehicle, those tires were almost in constant motion as she's starting to drive away. So she's turning. Does that mean the vehicle isn't also going to be moving? It's not a crab walk. It's not going to sideways move. The vehicle has to go forward to turn. That's how vehicles work. There's contact between him and the vehicle. The problem is, while that's 100% true, the characterization from the pro ICE side that he's rammed, that he's struck, that I've seen people say he rolls off the hood. Well, pretty clearly from that other still shot, he's not rolling off the hood in the sense that he's swept off his feet and out of control. He's very much in control of his upper and lower body. He fires 3 shots, 1 through the windshield, 2 that apparently go through the open driver's side window, and he never hits the ground. He walks away. Some people say he's walking with a limp. Okay, maybe the limp's from where he got 33 stitches 3 months ago. I don't know. I know his weak hand is out, which is natural reaction to bracing against the vehicle. And I think I have not seen a definitive angle or clarity that suggests or that clearly lets me know whether or not his body or even leg was struck. I know his weak hand touches that vehicle, and I know that he is moved by his own actions and potentially from the physics of the vehicle much more to the side than to the front, and at no point does he roll up onto or off of the hood. So again, we get back to the sensationalization, to the end of the narrative of he needed to do that. The problem is you don't need to Christy Noem it. You don't need to create this scenario where they were just pushing a vehicle out of a snowbank and this woman came in out of nowhere to ram him. You don't have to create that scenario to say he perceived a lethal threat and was justified in using a lethal response. But in trying to create that narrative, you undermine your credibility.
Well, and I think you really just kind of took it to where I wanted to go, and that I think that a lot of this situation and a lot of these situations are caused by rhetoric that takes place that's not currently in the situation. I mean, when you have, for example, the police chief of Philadelphia saying things, well, like this.
Good afternoon. I'm Rochelle Bilal, the sheriff for the city and county of Philadelphia. And I say her name, Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. Renee Good. This should not have happened, but we're here today. Let know that law enforcement professionals, real ones, not the fake made up ICE, probably Trump's new army to attack citizens of the United States. Did you hear what I said? No law enforcement professional wears a mask. None.
Okay, so
Not helpful.
The only 2 things she said that was correct was her name is Renee Good, or her name. She said her name, and I think that was really about it. And she said Renee Good's name. That was it. Those are the only true things that she said. And I'm like, my problem is this: is that these are agents who are, some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrats, but some of them because whatever. But these are people who are there doing their jobs. And when you have people like that, when you have people who are pushing rhetoric that is encouraging attacks, because it's not like this is the first. I mean, there have been people who have intentionally rammed ICE agents, right? There have been incidents where they have intentionally attacked them. All this does is that it gives them license. It creates an environment where there is license. When people who are thought leaders or just leaders, when you give voice to extremist positions, you create a permission structure for people to feel like it's okay for them to do stuff, right? And in this particular case, I think you're right. There's no telling that she tried to hit the officer. I don't see evidence that she tried to hit the officer. What I see is that she put herself in a situation where she felt like she needed to stop officers, and that, she had that by any means necessary, which in this case was blocking the streets.
Yeah, I mean, so even that, like, you and I could come up in about 12 seconds with 20 ways by any means necessary is a lot more definitive than parking in the
Right.
middle of the road, right? So
Right.
that was her threshold, and
Right.
I think she probably didn't think that was a big deal. The sheriff from Philadelphia, it's an eye roll, right? Is it a problem? Is it helpful? No. Is it a problem? Probably. Does it send the message you're talking about? I'm sure there's somebody that hears that,
And
but how much more responsibility
Mhm.
is there in terms of being responsible with your commentary on Noam, Trump, Vance, right? When they're saying things that suggest that what citizens do is going to be misrepresented and sensationalized, when they're sending messages that agents can do whatever they want, they're not going to be held accountable if they do something wrong. I think that's as escalating. And again, I think now you've got, because they're in the chain of command, there's a dereliction of duty. The mayor of Minneapolis, he needs to be, there's probably other things he needs to worry more about with the government. I spent a lot of time in Minneapolis, PDN's headquarters there, the fraud situations they've got, the way that the city is being run and has been run in recent history. They've got a lot of issues to deal with. And so I was talking to a good friend of mine in Minneapolis yesterday, and unfortunately, some of this is actually going to provide cover to the people involved in the fraud case, because now they can point and say, well, we're dealing with this ICE problem. That's a
Right.
lot. People are dying in the streets. Don't talk to me about some dollars and cents.
Well,
That's a
exactly. So
problem.
I think one of the differences is, and then once again, for the most part, in a lot of the rhetoric that you've seen coming from, I'll just say, in this case, I'll just say the right, you haven't seen it coming from leaders or opinion leaders. And I will just say that what Kristi Noem, how she characterized it, was over the top, and I believe was hyperbolic. And I'm not going to say I'm not going to say that the evidence is not necessarily supporting everything that she said. The fact that she went on and said, we're still investigating. Well, why did you make a definitive statement
Right.
if you're still investigating? So there's that.
Right.
But what we're seeing now is the rhetoric on the left. I'm not saying that it's motivating the left. I'm saying that there are people who are out there who are looking for reasons to be engaged or to do things, and they are taking a hold of that rhetoric of the left, and they are acting on it. We are seeing ICE agents, we're seeing law enforcement officers, we're seeing politicians, we're seeing opinions all being attacked, and I'm like, can we just tone down? I mean, can you come to understand that when you say stuff like that, well, you're not legitimate law enforcement. Well, if they're not legitimate law enforcement, then they're like the president's own
Right.
personal security force out there attacking the American people. Well, you give license to a person
That's
who,
incredible. Yeah, that stuff's incredibly irresponsible. And that's why, so like Governor Waltz, and especially if you go back and listen to yesterday, the comments from the chief of police in Minneapolis, his comments, he said, look, I know you're going to do this. We know you're going to protest. We know you're going to be in the streets. Here's the things that are okay.
right?
Here's the things that are not okay. That's what needs to be said. If you want to be
Yes,
anti-ICE, you have to write a script for the people that you want to take whatever this action is that
right,
isn't sensationalizing.
right.
I want, here's an interesting thought experiment maybe for the 2A news audience, and I've had this conversation with a lot of friends over the whole period since the National Guard has been put places, ICE has been upping their activities, in cities that aren't border cities, stuff like that. Let's just for a minute imagine this is a Democrat administration, and that it's not ICE that's being mobilized to go to the Home Depot parking lot where there's a suspicion that there's illegal immigrants. It's the ATF. And they're going to the gun show where there's suspicion that people are illegally selling guns. Or they're going to the gun range where there's suspicion that there's unregistered NFA items being used. And they're checking people's paperwork, and they're in the parking lot, and they're going door to door. If people are walking down the street, I mean, the 90s, the old stop and frisk. If the federal agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives were doing stop and frisk, which is essentially what the ICE agents are doing now in rural areas all across America to try to find the illegal guns, I don't think we'd be hearing the same rhetoric. I don't think we'd be seeing the same attitudes towards, the law enforcement guys just doing their job. And I think that's an
Probably not from the
incredibly
2A.
fair parallel.
Probably not from the 2A community, but I'll tell you what you wouldn't see. You wouldn't see some of the actual responses that we're seeing. And I'm not saying that nobody would do it, but you're literally having people who are in Congress, who are sitting on city councils, who are in state legislatures, who are encouraging people to go out and take action against law enforcement. I doubt that you would
I think
see.
you're right. I think the response, the conservative response is always going to be more conservative. It's one of the, Diana Muller and I, talk about this all the time. The reason that her rallies aren't that big in DC. And even when I had the 2A rally, we only had a few thousand people. Like, we're not ralliers. We're conservative people, right? Like, we aren't the people that go out and march. But I'll tell you, I can't say that I wouldn't be out there unarmed, judiciously, I think sensibly, uh, videotaping, blowing a
Mhm.
whistle and saying we don't want the ATF coming to this gun range, and everybody at this
Right.
gun show inside needs to know the ATF's about to sweep
Mhm.
through here and randomly start checking people's paperwork.
Mhm.
I do think that I would be motivated to action
Mhm.
in that situation. And I
Right.
bet a lot of my friends in the industry and in the community would be as well. I mean, we were out there, there were a lot of us out there protesting and being active during the shutdowns during COVID. I was all around Denver. I was still living in Denver at the time, and we were all around there. Reopen Denver, reopen Colorado. I was in New York City, just north of Manhattan, opened up a gun range against the governor's orders there, and we had somebody from Health and Homeland, uh, what was that, Health and Human Services, from the emergency hospital at the Javits Center that was set up come in. We had somebody else who was working at the Kings County Hospital, who was a respiratory trauma specialist who was involved in the federal response down at the White House. And they came in to observe how we reopened that range against government orders so that people could practice, including the local police would have a place to qualify by reopening that indoor range in May of 2020, the height of COVID shutdowns in New York. So I'm not afraid of protest, but there's a way to do it. The way to do
Right.
it isn't a way that escalates to getting somebody shot in the face, but I have to rely on a certain amount of professionalism from the officers that may be just trying to do their job in the face of my protest. I have to rely on a certain amount of professionalism. And again, as a trainer and as an
Mhm.
educator, kind of going back to where we started, that's how I have to look at this situation. Is the guys with the flashy lights and the badges have a burden of
Mhm.
responsibility that goes beyond bad decisions being made by people who want to be activists.
Right. And I think from my perspective as someone who's worked both in media and in public policy, understanding that the bigger stage you have, the more your words have impact, and you need to be responsible for the words that you put out there. And it's important that if we don't want people being shot at protests, if we don't want people being injured, if we don't want ICE agents being attacked, it's important that we make sure that when we encourage protest, that we encourage it responsibly, right? It's
Absolutely. Write a
important,
script. Yeah. And
right?
you can't
It
undermine, to your point, you can't undermine the legitimacy of the agency. You can't
Yes,
undermine that these guys have no business here. Get the fuck out of Minneapolis, to quote the mayor. Well, you're just encouraging people to
right.
disregard the authority and again the responsibility that those agents have. You can be mad at Trump. You can be mad at Nome.
Mhm.
You could think they need to be impeached, removed, vote about it next time, all that stuff. But what you can't do is suggest that that guy with the gun and the badge and the flashy lights standing in the
Mhm.
street is somehow illegitimate,
By
because
the way
that's how
by the
you
way,
end up with
who
more
may or
situations like
may not
yesterday.
have voted for the politician that you like
Right,
or
right.
dislike.
Yeah, he may have been working there. A lot of people are like, oh, they're playing the stupid ads, that ICE has done this year with, like, to the guy playing Halo, Stop the Flood. Like, they're insinuating that
Right.
this guy who shot her 6 months ago was in his mom's basement sitting on a couch playing Halo, wanting to be a big guy in the street with a gun. And I don't think that's fair, because a lot of these agents
No.
have been there for years and years and years and
Mhm.
years, and
Right.
they didn't buy in for this. They came in to do a
Right.
job. They've been doing it professionally for a long time. They're probably trying to do it professionally right now, and no, neither side is making it easy for 'em.
Exactly. This has been a phenomenal discussion, but I want to give you an opportunity to let folks know a little bit more about the Personal Defense Network, how they can follow the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We've been providing. We're now in our 21st year. So we started in 2005 at Personal Defense Network. Originally, we were a DVD series. We made over 100 DVDs over the course of about a decade, 12 years. Shipped over 6 million of them. A lot of them through partners like Guns and Ammo Magazine, Second Amendment Foundation, the NRA. About 15 years ago, we moved everything to online streaming. Obviously, we knew DVDs weren't going to last forever. So personaldefensenetwork.com is where you can find almost 2,000 pieces of content, articles, and videos. About 45% of it's in front of the paywall. So just show up, go into the search engine. If you want to look at complying with officers or interacting with law enforcement while armed, dealing with riots, getting caught in a riot, getting caught in a public activist situation that you had no part of, but all of a sudden the mob is coming down your street or going by the intersection that your car is parked at. We have all kinds of information there. And then obviously we have a premium membership. People can get even more information. We've got a whole team of instructors in every area of personal defense specialty, from health and fitness and medical down to obviously a lot of the firearm stuff. We do a lot of gear review. And we also do a tour that takes about 20 of our instructors, 15 to 20 instructors around the country every year, providing training all around the world now, but specifically around the US. And that goes from March to September. But personaldefensenetwork.com is where people can learn more about what we think people should do in these situations. And there is a lot of information there for armed professionals as well.
Phenomenal. So, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. This was a good conversation. I learned some stuff. And I appreciate you offering a perspective that is reasonable, sound, and rational.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate the invitation, and see you at SHOT Show, I guess, in a couple weeks.
We will definitely see you at SHOT Show.
All right. Thanks,
All
buddy.
right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this program of this episode of 2A News. Remember to like, share, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Our website, 2anews.us, we're still working on getting it finalized and getting it up, but you can also find us. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. Just look for at 2A News, no space between the A and the news. In any case, y'all have fun. Very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with y'all. Not going to have any shows over the weekend, but who knows? There's going to be lots of fun stuff to be talking about next week with everything that's been going on. So once again, thank you so much for everything. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. We will see you, on Monday.